Ladies and gentlemen, in 2006, early in 2006, I was invited by Brigham Young University to present a talk on the topic they selected, blacks and the LDS Priesthood. And that was the broad topic, and I could have approached it a number of ways, but I thought rather than try to give an interpretation, the best thing might be just to give a chronology of what happened. So what we're going to look at very quickly here is a chronology of that subject, blacks and the LDS priesthood. There will be one key that you really need to watch for. On most of the slides, there will be a date that starts the text. Note the date, because we're just going to be swimming forward in time. History of blacks and the LDS priesthood. Greatest story of the 20th century. Now this is interesting. At the end of 1999, as we were about to go into the year 2000, the Church News conducted a poll to determine which were the greatest, most important stories of its readership during the 1900s. And the century's top story was the revelation extending the priesthood to all worthy males. That was the #1 story of the readership of the Church News, covering a 100-year period of time. The second place story wasn't even a close finish. Where to begin? We have old history, we have more recent history, we have publications, and we have current day. If we look at current day, I'm going to drop back to just a year ago, and that would have been April in 2006, when in the priesthood session of General Conference, President Hinckley made these comments. As a person grows older, he becomes a softer touch, has a kindlier manner. As this has happened to me, I've wondered why it is there's so much hatred and conflict in the world, so much pride and jealousy. Racial strife still raises its ugly head even among church members. There are reports of racial slurs and denigrating remarks among us. This is unacceptable. I remind you that no man who makes disparaging remarks concerning those of another race can consider himself a true disciple of Christ. How can any man holding the Melchizedek priesthood arrogantly assume that he is eligible for the priesthood, whereas another who lives a righteous life, but whose skin is of a different color, is ineligible? We rejoiced in the 1978 revelation in the temple. There was no doubt in my mind or those of my associates that what was revealed was the will of God. I have often spoken of the diversity among us and taught that each of us is a son or daughter of God. There is no basis for racial hatred among the priesthood. If you have such feelings, go before the Lord and ask for forgiveness. I don't think that we could have a clearer statement from the prophet of the Lord or from any person upon the earth. Now for the history. A partial chronology concerning blacks in the LDS priesthood. And I say partial because if we were to do an exhaustive chronology, we'd be here until tomorrow noon. 1830, again note that we will have dates at the beginning of most of these. The Book of Mormon is published. In it, a dark skin is often used to symbolize the Lamanites' separation from God. Quote, the Lord did cause a skin of blackness to come upon the Lamanites. July 1831, Joseph Smith follows the example of most Christian churches and proclaims Negroes as descended from Ham. Quote, the first Sabbath after our arrival in Jackson County, Brother W.W. Phelps preached to a Western audience wherein were present specimens of all the families of the earth, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, quite a respectable number of Negroes, descendants of Ham. Church history. Prophetic Statements, again the date, 1832, moving forward. Joseph Smith Jr. gives a revelation about the coming war. Beginning at the rebellion of South Carolina, when slaves shall rise up against their masters, resulting in the death and misery of many souls. 1832, the war started in 1861. So it is indeed prophetic. An early black member. You have seen a drawing of Brother Elijah Abel. Well, this is a picture of the man himself. 1832, Elijah Abel, a black man, is baptized and later ordained to the Melchizedek priesthood. Over the years, some dispute his exact ethnicity to justify his priesthood. Some say he was white, which seems unlikely given later comments about him. Some of those later comments are, he shows up in the 1870 census, and according to federal regulations, the census takers were to look at an individual and only by looking determine his or her race. They weren't to ask, what race are you, but just by looking at the person. In the 1870 census, Brother Elijah Abel is listed as black. In the 1880 census, he is listed as mulatto. And as we look at his picture, it is clear that he is a person of mixed ancestry, but he does have more than one drop. Free people of color, 1833. W. Phelps writes an article in the Evening and Morning Star entitled Free People of Color. His words are interpreted by Missourians as an invitation for slaves to leave their masters and join the Mormons. Pro-slavery Missourians view Mormons as an abolitionist force and create an anti-Mormon manifesto. Now here's a beginning. This is a gentleman that few know, but his name is one that you might want to remember. He is a significant part of this history. 1834 marks an event which will be remembered by Zebedee Coltrane some 45 years later. Coltrane had an experience that he says took place in 1834, which he later recounted, and it is that which will be the beginning of the priesthood policy. Coltrane will say that Joseph Smith received revelation that blacks were not to be ordained. Here is the memory. Brother Joseph kind of dropped his head and rested it on his hand for a minute and then said, "Brother Zebedee is right, for the Spirit of the Lord saith the Negro has no right nor cannot hold the priesthood." Now, this is the memory of Brother Zebedee Coltrane remembered some 45 years later. The prophet's view, note the date. 1835, Joseph Smith repeats an earlier statement that elders are to avoid preaching to slaves or servants unless granted permission by their masters. Early scriptures, we have the Doctrine and Covenants, 1835 to 1839. It notes that the gospel is for all people and races and that all are equal in that gospel. So here we have Brother Elijah Abel again, March 1836. Brother Elijah Abel is ordained an elder by Joseph Smith, Jr., according to Eunice Kinney in her letter called My Testimony of the Latter-day Work. We have on record the certificate of Brother Abel's ordination. It is dated 3 March 1836. Now, if you'll notice that date, 1836, is 2 years after the prophet Joseph Smith, according to Zebedee Coltrane, said that Negroes could not hold the priesthood. Also in 1836, Elijah Abel is given a patriarchal blessing by Joseph Smith Sr. No lineage is declared. The blessing does state, quote, "Thou hast been ordained an elder and appointed to secure thee against the power of the destroyer," close quote. And sometime in the Kirtland era, Brother Abel was washed and anointed in the Kirtland Temple. 1836, December. This same Elijah Abel is ordained as 70. The ordination is performed by Zebedee Coltrane according to certificates on record. Abel becomes a duly licensed minister of the gospel for missionary work in Ohio. He later serves missions in New York and Canada. Brother Elijah Abel served 3 full-time missions for the church. Priesthood not questioned. We move forward to June 1839. Joseph Smith, Jr. attends a meeting at which Elijah Abel's activities are discussed. Abel's priesthood is not questioned. During this period of time, we have the Pearl of Great Price being put on paper by the prophet. This work makes significant references to the people of Canaan and descendants of Cain. Here it says, Enoch ministers the gospel to the surrounding nations, but does not go to those of the lineage of Canaan who are identified as black. And as Brother Perkins has pointed out, you can have your own interpretation, whether that was skin color or countenance or their spirituality. But I point out that Enoch, this Enoch that we're speaking of here, was in the period of time before the flood. And God brought the flood upon the earth because the world was wicked. And he did not drown only black folks, were there people of this racial origin, but he had drowned all the wicked and left only Noah, his wife, the 3 sons, and their wives. So all of these people of which were written died in the flood. And it came to pass that Enoch continued to call upon all the people, save it were the people of Canaan, to repent. Moses 7:12. 1843, apostles Heber C. Kimball, Orson Pratt, and John Page suggest Elijah Abel's missionary work be directed only to his own people. Abel's priesthood seems not at issue. Again, the year is 1843. Abel serves yet another mission. More than one, 1844 or earlier. Walker Lewis, a founding member of the Massachusetts General Colored Association, a racial abolitionist all-black organization, is ordained an elder by William Smith, younger brother of Joseph Smith, Jr., in Lowell, Massachusetts. Again, the year 1844, 10 years after the memory that Brother Coltrane said took place with the prophet. 1844, Joseph Smith Jr. campaigns for the presidency of the United States on an anti-slavery platform aimed at ending slavery by 1850. President Smith states, "Break off the shackles of the poor black man and hire him to labor like any other human being, for an hour of virtuous liberty on earth is worth a whole eternity of bondage," close quote. And then we had that horrible day, June 1844. And the martyrdom of Brother Joseph and his brother, Hiram. I don't know how many of you have had the opportunity to visit some of the church sites, but to be in that building, in that jail at Carthage, and to go into that room and see the bullet hole in the door, the bullet that went through and then killed Hiram, striking him in the head, and to see the window where the prophet was when he was shot and then through which he fell to the ground, you get a sense of the history and the magnitude of the crime that was done. Later that same year, 1844, Apostle Wilford Woodruff visits Lowell, Massachusetts, and notes that, quote, "a colored brother who was an elder," close quote, presumably Walker Lewis, was in attendance. 27 April 1845, Orson Hyde suggests that the, quote, "curse of slavery," end quote, could be traced to the premortal existence where some spirits, quote, "lent an influence to the devil," close quote. He speculates that these spirits, quote, "take bodies in the accursed lineage of Canaan and hence the Negro or African race," close quote. So we've had Elijah Abel, we had Walker Lewis, now we have a third one. October 1846, William McCary is baptized and ordained by Apostle Orson Hyde, the man whom we just saw. We also have the would-be black prophet here. In the fall of 1847, biracial, self-proclaimed prophet William McCary has several white women, quote, "sealed to him in his way," which was as follows, and note that this is a quote, "the form of sealing was for the women to go to bed with him in the daytime," close quote. Brother McCary is subsequently expelled from the community of Latter-day Saints. This is a pivotal point, 1847, and the actions of this man would be self-proclaimed prophet William McCary. The new leader speaks. Brigham Young says, quote, "It's nothing to do with the blood, for of one blood has God made all flesh. We have one of the best elders, an African, probably Walker Lewis, in Lowell, Massachusetts." Now we have the earliest statement on priesthood restriction. Note the year, February 1849. Brigham Young declares, quote, "Because Cain cut off the lives of Abel, the Lord cursed Cain's seed and prohibited them from the priesthood," close quote. That is the earliest statement that we have on record. We have the influx of Southern saints. 1850, 12 Mormon slave owners, including church leaders, possessed between 60 and 70 black slaves in the Utah Territory. Put this in perspective. The Mormon church started in upstate New York, and then we were in Ohio, And then from Ohio, we journeyed down to Missouri. So we had built a temple in Kirtland. The saints had spent so much of their treasure doing that, and yet they left there and went to Independence, and they undertook to build a community there, and they were doing well there. And then they went to Nauvoo and built a second temple. By the time they had done this, their pockets were empty. Then we had the trouble in Nauvoo that caused the saints to have to flee from that city. And with the prophet now dead, having been shot in Carthage, and we have the saints then going toward Nebraska, winter quarters, and finally to the west, it is a new day. And once the saints are here in Utah, which of course occurred in 1847, they arrived as poor as church mice, didn't have money to buy anything. But the seeds had been planted by early missionaries in the southern states. And among those who were now the new converts were slave owners who had not been in Kirtland, had not spent their money in Kirtland, had not been in Independence, and had not also been in Nauvoo. These Southern saints now joined the body of the Latter-day Saints in Utah in 1850, and they brought with them an infusion of money, cash, and probably their greatest asset, dollar-wise, slaves. So to put that in perspective, 1852, the question is asked, why was Utah a slave territory? In the research that we've done, we find that Brother Brigham was trying to accommodate the Southern saints, those who had now come into the territory. President Young visited the Utah Territorial Legislature in 1852 and gave a rather impassioned speech in which he spoke ill of the descendants of Ham. And as a result of his words, legislation was passed by that legislative body in 1852 authorizing the slavery of blacks in the territory of Utah. In the California Compromise, where California came into the nation as a free state, there was a great debate in the nation because slavery was such a hot topic. And there were those who were in favor of slavery and those who were opposed. And so the compromise was California could come into the Union free, but then Utah Territory and New Mexico Territory were given the option of being either free or slave. New Mexico opted for free. Utah opted for slave. 1852, an act in relation to service. 1852, same year, Elder Orson Pratt reasons that since our place in the afterlife is dependent upon our actions here, then our placement on earth must reflect our actions in the pre-existence. It's his supposition. Because the Doctrine and Covenants says that a terrestrial glory is for those who are, quote, are not valiant in their testimony of Jesus, close quote, in this life, Elder Pratt speculates that spirits who were born black must have been, quote, less valiant, close quote, in the war in heaven. Now, here I'm stepping away from the linear chronological scale, and we're going to jump forward. Two works published by Orson Pratt are found to advance, quote, incorrect and unsound doctrine. The First Presidency and the Quorum of the 12 correct Orson's false teaching with a public reprimand published in the Millennial Star, and there's the citation dated October 21, 1865. The Logic of the Brethren, the First Presidency and the Quorum of the 12, quote, we do not wish incorrect and unsound doctrine to be handed down to posterity under the sanction of great names, to be received and valued by future generations as authentic and reliable, creating labor and difficulties for our successors to perform and to contend with, for which we ought not to transmit to them. The interest of posterity are, to a certain extent, in our hands, close quote. And they continue, errors in history and in doctrine, if left uncorrected by us who are conversant with the events and who are in a position to judge of the truth or falsity of the doctrines, would go down to our children as though we had sanctioned and endorsed them. Such a construction could be put upon our silence respecting them, and would tend to perplex and mislead posterity, and make the labor of correction an exceedingly difficult one for them, close quote. Now we go back to the timeline. Brother Elijah Abel again, Elder Abel, 1853. Brother Abel has petitioned Brigham Young to receive his endowment, and that petition is denied. Again, Brother Abel was washed and anointed in the Kirtland Temple, but he was not in Nauvoo at the time that the endowment was instituted, so he could not avail himself of that temple blessing. But he is asking for it now and is being told no. We have conflicting accounts. On the left, we have Zebedee Coltrane, and on the right, we have Joseph F. Smith. And this is 1879. Zebedee Coltrane claims that Abel was dropped from the Quorum of 70 when Joseph Smith Jr. learned that Abel was black. Apostle Joseph F. Smith, he is now an apostle and will later become the president of the church, challenges Coltrane's claim. This is Joseph F. Smith, shows 2 certificates of Abel's reordination to the office of 70. In those days, you had to be recertified, and every so many years, that certification took place. And what Joseph F. Smith did was go to the home of Elijah Abel and ask him about his priesthood, and Brother Abel was able to produce the certificates of recertification indicating that indeed he was yet a member of that quorum of the 70. And so he took that back to the body asking the question. Accuracy matters. Brother Coltrane's memory is shown to be unreliable. His claimed date, 1834, for Joseph Smith's announcing the alleged ban is impossible, since Coltrane himself ordained Abel a 70 in 1836. Again, I'm trying not to put any interpretation on this. This is a chronological history. We fast forward. 1879, Elijah Abel claims, quote, the prophet Joseph told him that he, Elijah Abel, was entitled to the priesthood. 1880, for the second time, Elijah Abel is denied the endowment, this time by the Quorum of the 12. 1883, Elijah Abel is on record as a member of the third Quorum of the 70, still a member of that body. 1884, Elijah Abel is sent on his third mission. He returns home ill and dies in December of 1884. Here is his obituary, and I think it tells us many things that you wouldn't see normally in an obituary. December 26, 1884, in the Deseret News, died Elijah Abel of old age and debility consequent upon exposure while laboring in the ministry in Ohio. He joined the church and was ordained an elder, as appears by certificate dated March 3, 1836. He was subsequently ordained a 70, as appears by certificate dated April 4, 1841. He died in full faith of the gospel. Second review, Joseph F. Smith again. 1895, Elijah Abel, now dead, 11 years, he died in 84, is again discussed by the Quorum of the 12. Joseph F. Smith once more disputes claims that Abel had been dropped from the priesthood, and he further makes 2 new claims. That Abel's original ordination was done under the direction of Joseph Smith Jr., which goes along with what Sister Eunice Kinney stated, and that Abel was ordained a high priest after being made a 70. Brother Abel's next generation, and this has been touched on earlier, 27 November 1900, Enoch Abel, a son of Elijah and Marianne Abel, is ordained an elder. And now we have a reversal. When I pass through the veil, and if I have a chance, I'm going to ask this good brother a question. I want to understand what happened here. After twice defending Brother Abel and his priesthood, after physically holding his certificates of recertification as a member of the 70, we have a reversal. And it takes place in 1908. Joseph F. Smith inexplicably reverses his former position and now claims that Joseph Smith himself declared Elijah Abel's ordination null and void. I don't understand that. However, on 5 July 1934, Elijah Abel's grandson, Elijah Abel, a grandson of the first Elijah Abel, is ordained a priest. Again, I point to the date, 5 July 1934. Priesthood is yet being given to persons of black descent. And on 29 September 1935, the same grandson, Elijah Abel, is ordained an elder. Comments in our literature. June of 1958, Brother McConkie publishes Mormon Doctrine under the heading for Negro. He states that Negroes are lineage of Cain through Ham's wife. They were less valued in the pre-existence, are banned from the priesthood, and the gospel message is not to be carried to them. J. Reuben Clark, for those of you who remember, they, and this is a quote, they, general authorities, sometimes have spoken out of turn. You will recall the prophet Joseph declared that a prophet is not always a prophet, close quote. He continues, even the president of the church himself may not always be moved upon by the Holy Ghost, close quote, when he addresses the people. This has happened about matters of doctrine, usually of a highly speculative nature. President J. Reuben Clark. Policy or doctrine, this too has been discussed, but I'll touch on it briefly. Again, 1954, David O. McKay. There is not now and never has been a doctrine in this church that the Negroes are under a divine curse. There is no doctrine in the church of any kind pertaining to the Negro. We believe that we have a scriptural precedence for withholding the priesthood from the Negro. It is a practice, not a doctrine. And the practice will someday be changed, and that's all there is to it, close quote. And that is from the writings of Sterling McMurrin, and it's also included in the new book by Greg Prince and Robert Wright on President McKay, going from his notes, his own desktop notes. Here's another man whom I was privileged to know. I knew President McKay, I knew President Brown. In 1969, President Hugh B. Brown proposes that the church's priesthood restriction be removed. This change is approved by the Quorum of the 12 and the First Presidency, with President McKay and Harold B. Lee absent. President McKay is incapacitated due to age, and President Lee is out of the country. When President Lee returns, he asks for further discussion. This time, the proposal to change the policy is rejected. I knew Brother Lee, had personal conversations with him. President Kimball, 1973, upon becoming president of the church, Spencer W. Kimball is asked about the priesthood restriction. He states, quote, the day might come when the blacks would be given the priesthood. Should that day come, it will be a matter of revelation, close quote, and I totally agree. It took revelation by God to set right something that had gotten somehow misplaced. The long-promised day, 1st of June, 1978, revelation is received granting priesthood to all worthy males, regardless of race. President Kimball states, quote, I offered the final prayer, this revelation and the assurance came to me so clearly that there was no question about it. I knew the time had come, close quote. And we have one of our active apostles today, Elder Dallin Oaks. Quote, God made a covenant with Abraham and promised him that through him all families or nations of the earth would be blessed. If ye be Christ's, then are ye Abraham's seed. Neither riches, nor lineage, nor any other privilege of birth should cause us to believe that we are better one to another. Elder Dallin H. Oaks. And to wrap this up, going back to the greatest source that we have, President Hinckley, restating, there is no basis for racial hatred among the priesthood. If you have such feelings, go before the Lord and ask for forgiveness. Thank you very much. That is a chronology, a short, brief chronology, but I think it's interesting to see the dates. Thank you very much. I'm grateful for the opportunity to have shared with you. And I'll make one final statement here that's a personal one. Ladies and gentlemen, I am a Latter-day Saint. I joined the church in December of 1964. I have been a Latter-day Saint for 42 years and counting. I have an abiding testimony of the truthfulness of the restored gospel upon the earth. Joseph Smith was a prophet of God. And to this day, we have another prophet of God, Gordon B. Hinckley. The restored gospel is with us. There is truth there. And what I've tried to do, and what Brother Marvin has tried to do today, is to bring light to darkness and to let truth trump fiction. I hope that you found it beneficial, and I thank you for the privilege of being able to present to you. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Oh, how long I searched my soul for the spirit that I could grab a hold, trying to find a loving way to tell the story. So brother, won't you lend a hand in keeping with your covenants? His word is all you need, so don't you worry. In this world we see so much iniquity. He has the power to heal all sorrow. So won't you learn his word, do away with all you've heard. Your love today can change tomorrow. Love is the key. Love is the key. A little faith, hope, and charity. Love is the key. Grab a hold of the first great command, then take the second one in your hand. Now place them on your head and bless your neighbor. Teach the truth if we are one, and have been since the world begun, and keeping promises requires labor. In this world we see so much iniquity. He has the power to heal all sorrow. So won't you learn his word and do away with all you've heard. Your love today can change tomorrow. Love is a key. Love is a key. Love is a key, my brother. No, no. A little faith, hope, and charity. Love is a key, yeah. All I really want to say now, you got his word, now let's make it right. Now he's looking down to see my brother, if we, my brother, can love one another. Love is a key, I'm telling you. Love is a key, yeah. All I really want to say now, you got his word, now let's make it right. Now he sent it down to see my brother, if you and I, we can love one another. Love is a key, is a key, yeah. Oh, no. Love is a key. Whether a vulture, love is a key. Yeah, it's your job to love. Love is the key.
Love is the key, everybody.
touch my soul, or the spirit that I could grab a hold. Trying to find a loving way to tell the story. So brother, won't you lend a hand in keeping with your covenants? His word is all you need, so don't you worry. In this world we see so much iniquity. He has the power to heal all sorrow. So won't you learn his word, do away with all you've heard. Your love today can change tomorrow.